Good morning. I'm Carl with the Hondo Public Library, and welcome to this month's Monday Memories. The state of Texas is a very iconic shape. This shape is used in all sorts of places, from official state signage, to infrastructure, to food, and whatever this is. But how did Texas get its shape? Why does this welcome sign look like this and not say this? Or this? Let's answer that question today in this chapter of Monday Memories. The first traces of the modern Texan border go back to the Adams-Onis Treaty, signed between Spain and the U.S. in 1819. It was most notable for the cession of Florida to the United States, but also cleaned up the border along the newly acquired Louisiana Territory. Now, the border between New Spain and the United States became the course of the Sabine River until it reached the 32nd parallel north, jumping due north to the Red River and following its course upstream to the 100th meridian west, then following the Arkansas River upstream to its headwaters, jumping due north to the 42nd parallel north and going east until it reached the Pacific Ocean. This border was kept when New Spain collapsed only 2 years later in 1821 and Mexico gained its independence. 15 years after that, and one Texas Revolution later, the Republic of Texas would begin to draw up its western border with Mexico. The border with Mexico was mostly defined by the current boundary, the Rio Grande, though initially Texas was bound by a much larger stretch of the river than it is today. The Republic's border followed the Rio Grande all the way up to its headwaters, then jumped due north to the 42nd parallel, where there existed a tri-point border between Mexico, the Republic of Texas, and the United States. However, the Mexican government maintained that Texas was a rebellious province, and not an independent nation, and that even if they were independent, the main river border between them was not the Rio Grande, but rather the Nueces River. From there, it jumped in straight diagonals between points on the San Antonio, Brazos, and Red Rivers, bounding an area about half the size of the current state. The Republic of Texas dealt with armed border clashes between themselves and Mexico for its entire existence, as both sides tried to legitimize their claim. In 1845, the border conflict became the U.S.'s problem when they annexed Texas. The United States was able to enforce its claim much better than the Republic had been able to, and the two sides went to war in 1846. The fighting continued for 2 more years until the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, and Mexico recognized that the state of Texas was American. All of the disputed land claimed by Texas was now undeniably American, and so the potential for another crisis between nations was gone. However, there was now a potential of crisis between the states. At this time, the Union was trying to carefully balance the admission of free states and slave states, and Texas' sheer size and the potential for the Mexican cession lands to become slaveholding lands had thrown this careful order into disarray. Attempts to divide Texas into smaller states were made, as well as attempts to take much more of Texas' western lands, including the Panhandle and El Paso. Eventually, the plan that won out in the Senate was the plan of James A. Pierce, who had Texas give up its claims to Santa Fe and all of modern-day New Mexico in exchange for keeping El Paso and getting to remain one large state. The Compromise of 1850 would do its job, but only for another decade. Solving this balance issue had only postponed, rather than averted, the Civil War. Texas was closer than ever to its modern-day shape, but there was one more anomaly to fix. This extra bit here at the top is Greer County, Texas. The boundary between Texas and the Indian Territory, or modern-day Oklahoma, had been set at the Red River. But as the river branched out, there became confusion as to what was the main part and what was a tributary feeding into the river. As a result, Texas claimed this 1.5 million acre, or about 2,300 square miles, tract of land north of its current border. The overlapping claim of Greer County between Texas and the federal government was heard by the Supreme Court in 1896, and they ruled in favor of the southern channel being Texas's border. Today, Greer County has been split into 3 separate counties and lies entirely within the state of Oklahoma. The Greer County decision was the last major change to Texas's borders, although minor changes have occurred since. The problem with using rivers, especially the Rio Grande, as a border is that rivers gradually change their course over time, which has led to small disputes between the U.S. and Mexico. Occasionally, small pieces of territory are traded between the countries if the river shifts and leaves portions of U.S. land south of the river and vice versa. But this doesn't cause a notable change to Texas' shape. As a result of all these changes, this sign doesn't look like this, it looks like this. And remember, don't mess with that shape.